Hello and welcome back to Unit 6 on Human Development. So this is actually going to be the most important lesson in my opinion. It's about personality, cognitive and moral development in childhood. So personality / identity, cognitive abilities like problem solving, and then morality, your sense of right and wrong. I think this is the most important topic because it's really fleshed out over a period of, or over a series of 3 graphs. And you'll see these referenced on here, and we're going to be doing some assignments and work with these to practice. Let's go ahead and jump into it, though. These are the 3 gentlemen who are responsible for these. So the first one that we're going to jump into is actually Erik Erikson, if I can get this to show up. All right, here we go. One of the things before I show you these graphs is to assume that these are called stage theories. And so what that means is that you're going to progress through these stages, in specific stages, in a certain order. You need to go through this order because one stage kind of builds off the next. So think of these like a staircase. Progress is generally related to age with regard to these stage theories. And there are sometimes some major discontinuities existing between the stages. So things that are really separating you and exclusive to one stage that are then not going to be part of the next, or big developmental change that happens throughout the stages. So the first part here, you can ignore the copy stages part because you're now seeing all of this, but it says Erikson's stage theory. So this is Erik Erikson. And this first theory is about personality and identity. And so the 8 stages here, let me see if I can move myself a bit out of the way. The first part of this is dealing with your identity before you have an identity. There's a lot of things that contribute to your identity, and you'll kind of think about that and reflect on that in an assignment. But initially what Erikson is saying is that there are 8 major psychosocial crises that we have to overcome because each stage has a struggle, and we have to then decide on an outcome as we move to the next stage. So I'm just going to go ahead now and start breaking these down with some examples. Stage 1 is called trust versus mistrust. And actually what you will see here, whoops, I did not mean to do that. All the titles are across the top. The kind of question to dictate what is defining this stage, what is it about, is there underneath. And then at the bottom, you get the classifications by age. So typically you have 4 that are associated with childhood, 1 that is kind of associated with adolescence or post-puberty, and then 3 that are for adulthood, 1 in early, and then middle, and then late adulthood each. So first stage is called trust versus mistrust, and the idea is your world predictable and supportive or not? This is in your first year of life. What is important to you during this time more than anything else? And the answer to that question is pretty simple. It's being nourished. It's being taken care of. It's food. So if you're fed consistently, you develop a sense of trust. If you're not fed consistently, if someone's not being the adult and being very responsible in regards to your needs, then instead you may develop a sense of distrust for being fed, and then as a result, distrust towards the world. Stage 2, autonomy versus shame and doubt. Now you're answering the question, can I do things myself or must I rely on others? So one of the first tasks here that's relative during the 2nd and 3rd years of your life would be something like toilet training. When you start recognizing that you have to go to the bathroom, kids start making very telltale signs and movements. They may cross their legs and kind of put their hand in their crotch, kind of wiggle around. This is indicative that they might have to go use the bathroom. So when you're toilet training and you're trying to get a child to learn this process of toilet training, which thankfully none of us remember, hopefully, the autonomy portion comes from starting to build some recognition in that individual that they might have to go to the bathroom. And then, in toilet training, they let someone know where they actually just go to the bathroom where they should, and as appropriately learning from the training. And so that's where you get the autonomy portion. It's kind of independence and self-understanding for that. Shame and doubt would be if you were doing toilet training and a kid makes a mistake. Maybe they accidentally poop their diaper or they urinate, and then they're made to kind of feel ashamed of that for not recognizing that you were supposed to tell me or you were supposed to go to the bathroom. So that is then the shame and doubt aspect of it. A kid who thought they maybe understood the toilet training procedure and the process, but they mistakenly, went to the bathroom in maybe their new underwear rather than still being in a diaper. And so as a result with that, they develop a sense of shame and doubt. And this blossoms during this time. Stage 3 is initiative versus guilt. Am I good or am I bad? This is now age 4 to 6 years old. So at this point, you're now going to school and you're having your first chance to kind of get a little bit of independence. So taking the initiative versus being guilted into the initiative. If you're playing with toys and you make a big mess and you're told to clean it up, are you being guilted into cleaning up that mess, or are you playing with toys and then you're supposed to take the initiative and clean it up? That's really the difference. Are you told, or do you have that initiative? That's how you form initiative versus guilt for the crisis. All right, stage 4 is industry versus inferiority. So you're definitely in school age now, and this is actually a couple of years longer than the others. So age 6 through puberty, which could be as young as 11 or 12, or maybe even 14. And so industry versus inferiority is dictated by the question, am I a competent individual or am I worthless? Because this is attributed to school age range, you're now having your first opportunities as a human being to really show a sense of productivity and competency. You're getting a chance to say, hey, I know what I'm doing, I can do this. Or the reverse happens, you instead feel a sense of worthlessness. Maybe you are not actually feeling like you're doing anything of value at this point. You're not demonstrating a competency towards maybe like reading or math in school. So you actually feel like you develop more of the inferiority element of this. It's worthless feeling. When you get to stage 5, now you're in adolescence. And this stage is known as identity versus role confusion, or just confusion. And basically this is, who are you and where are you going in life? What have you figured out in terms of your identity? Are you religious? Are you political? Are you a person who believes in this or who believes in that? That's part of your identity. Who are you and where are you going? Versus, hey, I think I want to be a doctor because I'm from a family of doctors. And that's what my family wants from me. But now I'm not so sure. Maybe I want to be an artist, or maybe I want to be a singer. I don't know. So that is identity versus role confusion. Who are you and where are you going? Stage 6, 7, and 8 are your adult ages. And these are the stages associated with early, middle, and then late adulthood. So stage 6 is probably the easiest, very simple. Intimacy versus isolation. In early adulthood, as you're exploring your environment, and that is often with relationships, you decide, hey, I don't want to be alone forever. I do want to look for someone. Or do I want to be alone forever? Do I want to share my life with someone, or do I want to be alone forever? So that's intimacy versus isolation. Stage 7, generativity versus self-absorption, sometimes also called stagnation. And here the question is, will I produce something of real value? In middle adulthood, this could be around the time someone has a midlife crisis. They start kind of wanting to know about legacy a little bit, like what am I leaving behind? What am I leaving for other people? Have I produced anything that's tangible that I'm leaving for, say, my kids or my family or for someone younger than me? Am I producing anything of value, or am I kind of stuck and stagnant? Those are your options. And then finally, I know this is long-winded, but stage 8 is integrity versus despair. Now the question becomes, have I lived a full life? Because you're probably at this point in time where you're too old to go back on certain regrets. And if you wanted to have a family, like, kids of your own kind of family, and you're 90 years old, that's probably, not going to happen. So how do you justify that? Maybe you did want to have a family, but then because of certain circumstances in life, your priorities change, and instead you threw yourself at something else. And then you can justify that at the end of your life and say, hey, I did want this, but I'm okay for not making that decision because my life turned out in this way and I'm fine with that. Then you have that sense of integrity. If towards the end of your life, you have a whole laundry list of things that you didn't do that you probably can't do now because of your age, then that is the despair. So these are the psychosocial crises, according to Erik Erikson, that are going to actually shape a lot of our identity and of our personality. And yeah, all right, not really much to say there, but this is kind of like a pro and con of Erikson's theory. All right, let's keep going. So next theory is Jean Piaget. There's Jean Piaget there. Theory of cognitive development. Interesting about Jean Piaget was that he often studied testing scores and kids' abilities, but he was mostly concerned with why did kids pick the wrong answers. So not a lot need to be explained about kids who are always correct and doing things well, but what about the kids who chose the wrong answers? Why did they pick the wrong answers? Why did they make those same mistakes over and over? And so that's what he studies. And so there's actually an acronym here that you can use to remember this, and you can make up your own if you want. But some of the famous ones are stinky pigs can fly or socks pulled over cold feet. These are going to characterize the 4 stages of thought processes and cognitive abilities as they develop in kids as they're maturing. And so again, stinky pigs can fly, which is SPCF, or socks pulled over cold feet. And now you will see the chart, which has the 4 of them here. So the first stage, stage 1, is called the sensory motor period. During this time, there's coordination of your sensory input, so the sensation that you experience from the world, coordinating that with your motor responses, your motor skills, movement. One of the things that develops, probably the primary problem-solving cognitive development during this time, is an idea called object permanence. And my guess is that you've encountered this before if you have ever played a game of peekaboo with a young child. And so when you play a game of peekaboo with a child who does not yet have object permanence developed, this is the most hilarious game for them. It's amusing. It's always funny because, you literally hide, you cover up your face, and then Shazam, you're there. And for them, they don't have object permanence. So when they can't see you, it's as if you're not existing. So everything becomes a surprise. But once you have developed object permanence, then the game is still fun because they're young kids, but it's not as fun. So if you drop down and hide, for example, behind the couch, even though they can't see you, they know that the object permanence is suggesting to them that you're still there. This also contributes to separation anxiety. So for example, if you are being dropped off at preschool and you're watching as a parent walks away, walks around a corner, that anxiety kicks in because you can no longer see them, but they're there. They've walked around that corner. So that's a tough thing to deal with. When you get to stage 2, you're now in the pre-operational period. And so in the pre-operational period, it's characterized by the development of symbolic thought marked by processes called irreversibility, centration, and egocentrism. So irreversibility is like playing a game of chess online where there's a button you can click on that says undo, and then you can replay that move. It's kind of an unfair kind of cheat. But kids in this age range, 2 to 7, typically struggle with irreversibility. They can't mentally undo something. They can't play something back and think, oh, what could have happened? So it's a struggle. Centration is about being stuck and focused on one part of a problem. So during this time, kids are not really able to do well with problems that have point of view or problems that are going to go beyond their point of view. That's a huge, huge struggle. And that's also reflected in egocentrism. Egocentrism is really how you can't share someone else's point of view. You're kind of stuck to your own. So in class, I often ask people to raise your hand if you're a male student, raise your hand if you have a brother, or if you're a female student, raise your hand if you have a sister. And then I would ask you the particular question. So I'm going to ask you now, if you're raising your hand, do you have a brother? Does your brother have a brother? Or if you have a sister, does your sister have a sister? And this is assuming that there's only one of those individuals. So if you have like multiple siblings, then that's not going to work. But the question would be like, for me, I have one brother and only one brother. So if someone asked me, does my brother have a brother? The answer is yes. And that person is me. So I'm just shifting the point of view to my brother. What's my brother's name? Well, his name would be Caleb, which is my name. So that is egocentrism. Kids struggle to deal with that. They can't think beyond their own point of view, which does impact problem solving and cognitive ability. As you move ahead, now you're in stage 3, 7 to 11 years. This is known as the concrete operational, and then stage 4, formal operational. The big difference that separates these is the concrete operational deals with a world of tangibles, things that you can actually see, you can hold. You apply mental abilities and cognitive ability to stuff that is a concrete object, a concrete event. Formal operational is allowing you to apply to the abstract, stuff that you can't see, hypothetical scenarios, things that are kind of abstract or futuristic in thought. So concrete operational period deals with by process. One of the things that's mastered is actually now you have some reversibility. You no longer struggle with centration as much. You are no longer dealing with egocentric thought. You can think from other points of view. Also, conservation develops. That would be like if I had, this is my water bottle here. And so if this holds, I forget how much water this holds. I think it holds 20 ounces. This is a 20-ounce bottle. What if I had, instead of a tall, skinny bottle, a smaller bottle that was like this, but it was wider? Almost if I like turned this sideways, but it was just, how to block off some of this, just that portion. And so knowing that a quantity can exist in different forms and still be the same amount. I know when I was a student many years ago, there was a test in science class with a beaker of water, and think of like you have a small, round, fat, thick beaker, and then a tall, skinny beaker. Looks, skinny like this. It's the same amount of water. And so you learn to understand and perceive that water in that way as the same quantity in both forms, whether it's, again, this one, the wide one, the small one, or the tall, skinny one. It's the same amount. So that's conservation. And that is in concrete operational. So lastly, formal operational. I mean, I kind of reviewed it earlier, but again, thinking about the abstract. What would you do if you won the lottery? That's futuristic thinking. That's abstract thinking. Because one, you don't know what's going to happen. And by the way, it's not going to happen. How do you apply that logical, systematic thinking towards things that are not necessarily tangible or concrete? So that is Piaget. And again, go through some of those. You can see them. You can pause if you want. But those are all the ideas explained there. And then criticism of Piaget as well. There has been some critical opinion about Piaget's theory. There actually is another theory which I can show you later on in the unit from a guy named Lev Vygotsky, but more on that later. So lastly, we get to the third of the theories here. This is now about right from wrong, moral reasoning, as it's called, morality. This comes from Lawrence Kohlberg. So Lawrence Kohlberg has a model for us to look at. How do we develop a sense of right and wrong? Think about it for yourself. How have you developed a sense for right and wrong? So there's 3 levels. They each have 2 sub-levels, and you can see them referenced here. But I'm just going to fast forward to the chart because that's what I've been doing for the other ones. So here's the chart. Again, 6 stages, but 3 levels. So the first stage is called the pre-conventional level. And I would just challenge you guys to think about, how are you developing a sense from right and wrong? What did you first use? How are you first taught right and wrong? And if you think about it, what will probably end up being on your mind is how you were punished and how you were rewarded. And this is the first level, pre-conventional level. So right and wrong is literally determined by punishments and rewards. So what gets punished and then what gets rewarded, that makes up stages 1 and stage 2. If you are stealing cookies from the cookie jar before dinner and then you don't eat your dinner and then you get punished for that, well, hopefully you're learning that that was wrong. If you have done something later on where you are then having it reciprocated through a reward, you might learn that, hey, I've displayed the correct behavior, so I'm good. This is correct. So that's the first level, pre-conventional. Then you move to the conventional level. At the conventional level, we have stages 3 and stages 4. And so the first part is really going to be dealing more with social approval or disapproval, and then law. And so stage 3 first deals with approvals, right and wrong being determined by the close approval or disapproval of others. Imagine you're in a scenario where you're invited to 2 events, and one event is the correct one that you should probably go to. Maybe it's like a family funeral, but it's also your best friend's 16th birthday party. And, how do you decide? You're either going to let down your friend, and that's really what you want to go to, or you have to go to a distant family member's funeral who you really didn't know. I mean, somebody is going to be disapproving and approving of your decision. Or if you have a different example, maybe you play on a sports team and you have a very big game or practice that needs to happen, but you're expected to go to some kind of family reunion. It's like, well, what do? Somebody's going to get let down, either my family or my team and my coaches. So that's stage 3. Stage 4 is when you determine morality, right and wrong, based on society's rules and laws, which you feel need to be obeyed rigidly. So the laws are not fallible. Whatever the law says, you follow. This could be a religious law. It could be a criminal law, a civil law, any laws that basically exist. If the law says that you shouldn't steal or you shouldn't kill someone, then no matter what, there's no fallibility. You just have to be obedient rigidly. So that's the conventional level. And then finally, Kohlberg explains stage 5 and 6, which is the post-conventional level. And now we are dealing with the ideas of justice and truth and fairness and equity. So first part, stage 5, the social contract orientation, is similar to stage 4 when it's about the law. However, this time laws are viewed as fallible rather than absolute, which means you could think of a scenario where somebody could probably violate the law and that would be okay. So it means that there's some gray area. You might understand how you could justify doing something wrong for the greater good. Think about like the Robin Hood mentality. You steal from the rich and give to the poor. Is it right? A lot of people would say no. Some people would say yes. It really depends on which side of which side of the coin you're on, so to speak. Stage 6 is just going to build off of that idea that laws are somewhat fallible rather than being absolute, and to say that now you're starting to develop your own individual principles and your own conscience for morality. And so you decide your ethical principles that emphasize two major standards of either equity and justice. So what is your justice? What is your equity? And how is that relating to the laws that you once thought were absolutely needing to be obeyed, that you then decided, okay, there's a fallible nature to the laws, and then okay, well, what do I think about this? What is my truth? What is my justice? And so as we bring that to the end, you can look at some of these questions again, kind of guiding you in terms of the individual stages. There's a famous story here, which I'll just briefly mention to end this video. It's known as the Heinz dilemma, and you can look it up. But this question has been posed to kids of a bunch of different ages and trying to determine where do they fall in terms of what they think is right and wrong. So in the story, basically you have this guy, Heinz, whose wife is battling an incurable illness. She's dying from this illness, and they've explored all possibilities to get her treatment and get better, and they've run out of options. So Heinz is desperate, and he ends up running into this guy at a pharmacy, who the pharmacist actually, who says, hey, I've got this cure-all medication, and I can give it to you, and it'll cure your wife. And Heinz is like, great, that sounds awesome. So Heinz goes to him, and the guy says, well, it's $50,000. And the numerical amount really doesn't matter. There's different versions where you change it around. We're just going to say it's $50,000. And Heinz is like, oh my gosh, $50,000. What do I do? I don't have $50,000. But I'll see what I can do. He explores all possibilities, can't get the $50,000. At best, he raises half the money. So he goes and pleads with the pharmacist, says, hey, I'll give you the money. Can I set up some kind of plan? Can I, work this off? Can we work something out? And the pharmacist basically says, no, I'm sorry, but I can't give you the medicine. It's all or none. And so Heinz is distraught. He goes home thinking like, oh man, my wife's going to die. What do I do? How do I save her? He decides that, in the middle of the night, he's going to break into the pharmacy, leave whatever money he has, or maybe not. In some versions, he doesn't, but break into the pharmacy, steal the medication, and save his wife's life. So that's how the story's told. And then kids at different ages, they're asked, who is most wrong in the story, or who committed the wrong behavior in the story? And based on the age of certain kids, they might say Heinz is in the wrong. They might say it's the pharmacist. They might go crazy and say it's the the big farm is to blame. I mean, there's a lot of options. Okay, so that story can then get altered in a couple of other ways. Heinz could then break into a pharmacy and in the middle of the night thinking he's alone, and he's not. And then self-defense, from being surprised, he ends up getting into a scuffle with someone and kills that person, and then steals the medicine, and the rest of the story is to blame. Well, who's to blame now? So now you're bringing in the idea of like murder and killing someone, and is that wrong? And how many levels is that wrong? And how does that relate to your own code of ethics and fairness and equity and justice and all that stuff? So that's the Heinz dilemma. It's an interesting philosophical kind of topic to discuss and think about, but that's really how I'm going to close down this video. So if you have any questions, hopefully they'll be answered with time and in connecting this with the reading. And as always, stay healthy, and I will see you next time. Adios.